Three, two, one. Welcome back to the Frequency of Fatherhood Summit. Today I have Ryan King. Some of you may know him as the Wisdom of Kings on Instagram. He is the CEO and president of Guardian Payments, soon to be Apogee Pays. He's a husband, he's a father of two, and he's a writer. And Ryan, I just want to first say thank you for coming today and speaking at the summit.
Man, I appreciate you having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, as we were formulating this summit, I was kind of going through a list of people that I follow, people that resonate with me, and you were one of those people that were up there on the list that I was like, I have to reach out to this guy. I have to get him on, because at the end of the day, like, as men, we want to be better fathers, we want to be better husbands. I think it comes down to learning from the men that are doing it, the men that are in the midst of it, they're on the front line. And I want to ask you, like, what drove you into this work? Like, what made you want to do this?
So I was kind of at a point in my career where it was kind of in maintenance mode. It wasn't something that was really taking up all my creative energy, and I'd spent a few years just kind of catching my breath from what I'd done to build Guardian up. And I started thinking about maybe writing a book or something like that, and I looked up a book on wisdom. I got on Amazon and just looked up books with wisdom in the title. And it was basically just a bunch of stuff on the book of Proverbs from the Bible. And like any dad, ever since I say like any dad, for me, once I had kids, part of me is always worried about, what would happen to them if something were to happen to me. Everything I've learned would die with me. And so the original premise behind me starting the Instagram account and starting the writing was to really write like a book of Proverbs for like our family, and have it be something. It wasn't, a lot of people read it and think, the wisdom of kings, like possessive, like my own personal wisdom. And it's really more of like the wisdom of our family was the original premise. And I'd like to eventually write a book with, things that I've learned that they can pass on to their kids and their kids and their kids, and have it be kind of like just like a record of things that we learn as we go through life to pass on to our descendants. I didn't know anything about what was going to happen once I got on Instagram, and the manosphere and everything that came along with all that. But that was originally what got me into the work.
Yeah, I resonate with that, because I think, like, in my own experience and what I've seen for me is, like, when I've gotten clear, when I've gotten intentional, when I've gotten all the family on the same page, the connections have gotten deeper. The vision and for the family, the clarity for the family's gotten deeper. I want to dive in, especially with your work, and ask you, like, from this journey, obviously you started because you wanted to create some proverbs for your family and something to leave behind for them. But as you're diving into the manosphere, like, what are we approaching? Like, why are fathers having a hard time being better father, being more present, being more, emotionally available? The list goes on and on.
I mean, the thing that really shocked me the most when I got on Instagram is how many men were so hungry. I think the term that I found that I'd never heard before is father hunger. And it really has. I expected women to come after me for promoting masculinity. It's been nothing but the opposite. So even with women, young women, women my own age, they see me as kind of a father figure, or like maybe like an older brother, just kind of an elder. And so I think just in general, for the last at least 40, 50 years, we've had a real issue with fatherlessness. And so now there's a lot of dads that are trying to be good dads and are gonna break the cycle of what happened with them maybe when they were kids, didn't have a dad around. But when you don't, regardless of what your intentions are, when you don't have a model to follow, it's kind of like you're just guessing, right? And so more often than not, when I talk to guys, they're on the right track. They just need somebody that has been there and done that to just say, yeah, man, you've got it. You're doing good. And just having somebody that, that they can bounce ideas off of, that can just confirm for them that they're doing a good job. A lot of times is all I really end up doing.
Yeah. Within your own journey, within your own like experience, as what I'm taking away from that is like surrounding ourselves with men, that are doing the work, men that are in this arena, men that are dealing with it could be shadow work, it could be, trying to prioritize self, understanding that self-care, there is self-care in men. When you surround yourself with men that were doing all that, what started to like change in your life? What started to show up?
Well, for me, I didn't have men in my life when I was going through that phase, right? Like, for most of my, I got married in 2008, and I was just so big with growing a business and raising kids and figuring out how to be married, stay married. Um, at the time, there really wasn't this breadth of resources for things like fatherhood and marriage. And, Instagram at that point was really just like pictures of people's food, you know. Um, YouTube was, cat videos, podcasts were basically mostly about sports. I mean, seriously, people take it for granted that but like in 2008, man, there was nothing. All this stuff we use is for technology and like these learning tools, they were not built out the way that they are built out now, not even close. So I didn't have a lot of men around me when I was going through a lot of this phase. For me personally, uh, I didn't really get a core. And the thing that I found is, man, it's hard, depending on where you live, it's hard to surround yourself with good men geographically. I think a lot of men are looking geographically close to find good men to surround themselves with. And at the end of the day, greatness is lonely. You can't just rely on the greatest dad within your zip code, because he still might not be that great. You know what I'm saying? And so for me, I never expected the caliber of men that I've met through these things that I've done online. Uh, and so for me, I think for the most part, I'd already kind of figured a lot of stuff out through trial and error by the time I got on Instagram. But for me, it's been the process of writing and creating. And it's almost like doing the inner work and kind of the shadow work you're talking about, where as I write or as I develop an idea that I want to share, uh, it forces me to take something that I might have only done sporadically, accidentally, and really defines it for me in terms of something that I can do consistently and repeatedly and intentionally. Um, and it's really, my wife has even said, like, you're a way better husband since you got on Instagram than you were before, because, man, I think everybody needs to spend time reflecting on the things they're doing well and the kind of man they want to be, the kind of father they want to be, the kind of husband they want to be. Um, and measuring that and comparing that against what they actually are. I think a lot of times as men, we think we're doing a better job than we are. We'll do
Yeah.
something right once or twice, but until we build it into a habit and do it intentionally, and compare that to, how have I acted this week? Like I've had some tough, come to Jesus moments, after I've written something to be like, man, I believe this. I've been thinking about this. And I've been writing about this, but it's been 2 months since I took my wife on a date. Like, I need to get it together, you know.
Yeah.
And so I think being around men, whether it is writing or just being exposed to men that are pushing themselves like that, I think the biggest thing it does is it really just puts a mirror against up against what your conduct actually is and forces you to really reflect on, are you being, because all of us want to be good men, all of us want to be good husbands, we're all trying to be good fathers, but it's also really easy to just go through the day-to-day life and look up and it's been a month since you did anything intentional that you really want to be, right? And I think it's one of the laws of the universe. It's like, everything is moving from a state of order to chaos at all times. And unless you're really, really going out of your way to monitor your habits, monitor your conduct, and be intentional as a father and as a husband, it's really easy, man, to just like wake up and just do your thing. And you look up a month or 2 months down the road and you haven't been, and it's turned into chaos. You haven't been intentional with your wife or your kids in a long time, but it's sneaky. You don't realize it. You're walking around thinking, man, I'm a good dad, I'm a good father, but you look back, if you had to take inventory of what you'd actually done for the last couple of months, you haven't done any of it. So that's what I think the real value is, having men around you, even if they're not speaking directly to you, just having men you're modeling. It just forces you to take inventory of your behavior. Whereas without that, it's very easy to think you're doing everything that you should be doing, when in reality, you're probably not as often as you should be.
You said something in there that I want to dive into more, and it may not be within the topic of the conversation, but it needs to be said. You talked about creativity, the way of writing and how it helps us with creativity, working into our shadow. Can you dive more into that? Because I think there's a lot of men out there, and I had this belief when I first started writing and journaling, was like, that's too fluffy for me. That's too, you know, I've heard men say, oh, I'm not gonna have a journal, I'm not gonna be, they feminize it. And I think that when we do that, we're not opening ourselves to an opportunity to dive within.
It definitely does. I experienced, and I still probably, especially on certain topics, I experience that resistance. Man, this feels really like, I don't know that I would label it as effeminate. It just feels very, I'm a pretty confident guy. I don't really doubt myself. But it's a whole different level when you create something and put it out into the world for people to just tear to pieces. You know what I'm saying? Like, most of my life, I've done all kinds of stuff, man. I've never worried about what, I've never crossed my mind to worry about what anyone was going to think, But like, if, for instance, if you were a movie director, like, you're making the movie so people like it. It's not just like, oh, a real man doesn't care what anybody thinks. Like, if you're making movies, you have to care what people think, right? And so it's a different level of, I don't know, I hate this word, but I can't think of a better word. It's just a different level of vulnerability. Like, before I release something, I feel a lot of times this real hesitation that I've never felt in my whole life. I've never been the type of guy that's like worried about what people think. But when you are writing something that you want people to like and share and comment and engage on, it forces you to really realize, like, maybe I do care what people think more than I thought, you know? And so, yeah, to answer your question, I mean, whether it's journaling or whether it's putting out a YouTube video or doing something like you're doing right now, putting yourself out there and having to really take what you're feeling and what you're thinking and the process of sorting through that into a way that is presentable to the world as a concept, it really solidifies, the right. It's almost like a recipe, right? Like, maybe you've been cooking a certain dish your whole life and you just kind of wing it. But man, when it comes time to, like, you're going to teach a cooking class to 20 people, you're like, whoa, all right. Like, I need to really go through, like, how long do I do this step and this step and how much of this seasoning do I actually use, And so it takes it from something that's just kind of instinctual and makes it um, repeatable. And that's a lot of, I mean, after I write a post, man, depending on which topic it is, I'm drained. I mean, I am mentally exhausted from taking something that I just kind of had as a vague idea in my head and really, really taking it and putting it down and just into a format that can be communicated. And man, it's been so helpful. It's incredibly helpful for me. And not every guy is going to go through that process, but I definitely think journaling, uh, in any kind of creative thing, and it's almost sad that we think of creative things in that vein as effeminate. That's very much like a last 70 years sort of bullshit. Like the greatest paintings of all time are painted by men, the greatest sculptures, the greatest architecture, the greatest, you know, is it effeminate that Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings? You know, like,
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. And I think that's really kind of a psyop that's been put on men where we've really gotten into a bad habit of tearing things down. It's almost like become a spectator sport to tear anything down. And we don't have very many men creating anymore. And, you know, you go back thousands of years, it was men who wrote history books. It was men who built the most beautiful buildings in the world over in Europe, And I think it's time we stop associating creativity with being effeminate, you know. I mean, whether it's music or whatever. I mean, whatever your creative expression is as a man, it can be whatever. Uh, embrace that. Like we need men, creating things to put out into the world. We can't get mad that Hollywood and everything has been feminized if we're not creating anything.
You said something very beautifully there, and I'm with you. The word vulnerability turns a lot away a lot of men, but I think where what I take away that is you're giving men permission to be able to open up, right? To create that lane, because as men we do model other healthy masculine relationship that we admire, we look up to, like like think about our fathers, right? Like if you had a father that was present, even if he wasn't present, right? Because that was the most, masculine relationship you see growing up. That's you're unconsciously going to emulate that. And so what I take away from everything you just said is that like we need to start opening up to give permission for those that are coming behind us to do that, to change the narrative. Instead of being passive, it's okay to be assertive, right? And this leads me to the next question of like, if you look at how society has like, I don't want to use the word shunned, but that's what's coming up for me. Like shunned men because we're assertive, we have clarity, we have direction. Like they call that toxic masculinity. How do we change the narrative around all that? Like, and I don't like to throw that out there, but I want to really help fathers say, like, understand that it's okay to be clear, it's okay to be assertive, it's okay to have direction, it's okay to have a voice. And we're growing up in a society where they're like, no, that's not okay.
Um, I don't know how we change the narrative. I just think we stop caring what anybody has to say. Just be okay with being misunderstood. Yeah, most women aren't going to understand me. If I act like a man the way, and that's the thing, right? Like if women aren't around, men just act like men amongst each other. We're not worried about if it's taken the wrong way or if we're being too assertive or whatever. We know that if it's a bunch of us in a group of men and one of us gets too assertive, we're gonna get slapped it back into our place. You know what I'm saying? Like dudes are gonna be like, bro, that's too far. You're like, all right, my bad. And that's the end of it. Usually, unless you're, a psycho. Um, so I think we have to, I don't want to say this, I don't want this to be interpreted the wrong way, but I think to a certain extent we have to realize where the line is that no matter what we do, it's just going to make women uncomfortable because it's just so different than anything they're used to. And as long as our heart posture is in the right place, we have to be willing to be misunderstood and just let that be it. And uh, I think if you have enough men stand up and do that, the critical mass of that will do the work of changing the narrative. So
That's
I don't think we really have to like go after the people that are saying, "Oh, that's toxic masculinity." Like I don't think we have to make it a battle of, don't whatever, right? Like I don't think we make them the enemy. I think we just do. I think we just focus on ourselves, and if they misunderstand it, I know my intentions aren't domineering or tyrannical. I know what my heart posture is and why I'm saying this and why I think it's important. And if you misunderstand it, that's fine. And I think if enough men, like you said, uh, just feel like they have a sense of permission to just be themselves and not, you know, push down and ignore, who they feel like they're supposed to be because it might rub somebody the wrong way. You'll reach critical mass eventually, and you don't really ever have to turn it into a battle of wills against feminism or whatever. Like it'll take care of itself.
Yeah, I want to dive into something you said earlier. It kind of goes back to, like men love tangible things. And I know there's men watching, they're probably saying, Ryan, I resonate with what you're saying. They're thinking about like, how can I do better? How can I get better? And you had said that you started this whole journey for yourself, kind of as a like proverbs for your family, so you can leave something behind. How, just diving into the tangible, like how can men take a step into becoming that intentional, getting clear with their family, getting clear with their kids, getting clear with their spouse? Like I know that sounds easy when it's said, but like, is there anything that's worked for you or you've seen or you just from your experience?
I think it take that's one of the here's the thing. I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of the biggest things. I would say one of the biggest gripes. I'll call it a gripe that I have with men is they gravitate towards tangible things, right? And so they like these things where there's a defined score or a defined limit. They like going to the gym and they're like, all right now I can deadlift 420. My goal for the end of the year is to deadlift 450, right? And like they like things that are inanimate objects that stay the same. And they gravitate towards these things, like whether it's martial arts, like, oh, I'm going to go from a white belt to a blue belt this year or whatever. And my biggest gripe with men is, guys, at some point, you're going to have to get comfortable with getting good at things that don't have tangible results. Because when it comes to being a father, when it comes to being a husband, when it comes to running a business, as soon as other people get involved, you cannot control the outcomes anymore. Okay. So in real life, when it comes to being a father, you can't just write down what the goals are for the kids and then at the end of the year be like, did the kids hit the goals? Because you can't climb in your kid's body and drive them around like a race car. They're another human. And so you've got to try a whole bunch of different things to see what's going to work. And what real life is more like is like, I want to deadlift 450 pounds. But every time I put a weight on, like some ninja runs up and pulls weights off and runs away. I can't control other people. And a lot of guys, they just drill down into these tangible, actionable, measurable things. And self growth is not measurable. Growing as a man, you don't know. The ways I would have thought I was going to grow as a man before I started writing didn't end up being the ways that I grew as a man. That's why men tend to fail so dramatically in their marriages, right? Because it's like they write down what kind of marriage they want to have and they try to just steamroll their wife into like be what I just said. Why will you not just well, your wife is not an inanimate object. You cannot just go put weights on and just lift it. Like the weights fight back. The weights have their own opinions. You know, like you might go to pick up the deadlift bar and it's made of rubber that day, like a spaghetti noodle. And you're sitting there and you can't get pissed off. And that's what a lot of guys do. They'll get pissed off when other people interrupt the goal they're trying to accomplish. And so men end up spending all their time focused on these tangible, measurable things like I want to read a certain amount of books or whatever. And yeah, that's great, but there's a whole skill set and a whole mindset around getting comfortable with just doing the best you can on things that you cannot have complete control over the outcome. I cannot make my wife change something that I want her to change. I cannot just put more weight on the bar and just grind my teeth and lift harder. And in fact, that's usually counterproductive when we put that energy towards our wife and our kids. And that's probably my biggest gripe with men is like, dude, not everything is controllable. You've got to let go of controlling outcomes and worrying about outcomes because you might not get the outcome you're looking for 4 or 5 years. You've got to focus on critical activities. What can I control? I can control my attitude. I can control that no matter what my wife says or does, I'm going to be patient and I'm going to be firm, but I'm not going to be rude. I'm not going to be authoritarian. I can control that, but I can't control how she responds to that. It might take years of that. And a lot of guys will give up because even though they're doing everything they know they should do, they're not getting the outcomes that they want when they think they should get them. So they give up and they flip out. Instead of when it comes to anything that has to do with other people, whether that's opening a business that needs employees or your kids or your wife or whatever, you've got to get out of that mindset of outcome oriented because as soon as other people get involved, you cannot make another person be who you think they should be. All you can do is use the skill sets that you have to influence, to lead, to model the kind of behavior that you want. And even then, it's no guarantee that they're going to do that. You have to stay within your frame as a man and trust that if you execute, it's a lot like, to use a metaphor, think about somebody like Tom Brady, right? Like he was famous for just executing the game plan. You know, he can't control if his receiver runs the wrong route. He can't control if the referee makes a bad call. He can't control if the defense just picks up on the play and jumps the route and gets an interception, right? Like, and a lot of guys mentally, they freak out if they do something right. Tom Brady had plays his whole career where he did everything right, but the receiver ran the wrong route. The, the safety, jumped the route and got an interception. Tom Brady did nothing wrong. He executed that play perfectly, and it still failed. It's still a pick six, right? And too many guys lose it when they execute everything perfectly, and it still goes wrong. And Tom Brady's famous for like, yeah, not every play is going to work, but over the course of an entire game, that's one frame of reference you can look at it. But even that, you could have a bad game, but you really measure it over the course of seasons at the end of the season and then a career of 15 seasons is really when we look at Tom Brady, we don't remember the 700 plays that he got wrong. Right. And so I think with guys, they would be much better served by you cannot control the outcomes, execute the play over and over and over again, like Tom Brady. And over the long run, the outcomes will take care of themselves. But you've got to detach from outcomes. You've got to focus on process.
Something just came up for me. I want to share it with you because the analogy you use, I love it. I was speaking with Jonathan Rios. He's another speaker here on the Frequency of Fatherhood Summit, and he had said he was like discipline. It's like a bicep, right? The more reps, the bigger it gets. And then the second thing that he had said is like that doesn't ultimately mean that you are going to be successful just because you're disciplined, right? Like hard work doesn't mean success. Keeping all of that there as a preface, like what wisdom, what proverbs, what do you have for men that like they're having the discipline, they're doing the reps, but they're not seeing change? Like what do you feel like there is there for them?
Well, step one is, are you doing the reps of the right thing? Go back to the drawing board. I mean, if you're doing the reps and you've got the discipline and you're doing the work and it's still not working, well, then maybe you're doing the wrong thing. Because Tom Brady can be as disciplined and hardworking as he wants, but if every time somebody snaps in the ball, he turns and throws it into the bleachers, he's not going to get the outcome that he wants. So my first piece of advice would be if you're being disciplined and you're doing the reps and you're not getting results, you're probably doing the wrong actions. Go back to the drawing board and figure out what you need to be disciplined at, and that's where you have to, in the book Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, it's begin with the end in mind and work backwards. You know, and so a lot of times if you're having that happen, more than likely it's you're doing whatever you're doing is the wrong thing to do to get the outcome you want. So periodically go back and review, like, you know, if you're trying to get stronger on bench press and you're just not, then no matter how disciplined you've been for the last 6 months, if you're not getting stronger on bench press, then you need to consult somebody that's a, exercise scientist. Try something different, because obviously what you're doing is not working. And I think a lot of men can take that too far, and they're like doing a different workout every day. So I'm not suggesting that, but I think on a quarterly basis, it's good to review what you're doing to see, like, is there a different, I said, disconnect from outcomes and focus on process. Eventually, if you're not getting the outcomes you want, then it's probably something wrong with the process. So go back to the drawing board on the process and try something different until, through discipline and through consistent action, it does end up creating the outcomes you want over a reasonable time frame.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And I want to dive into, with this discipline topic that we just talked about, I want to dive into, you had mentioned at the very beginning that Wisdom of Kings, it's kind of been a creative outlet. It's something that you created to leave behind or create something for your family. How is this whole journey for you? Like, you've gotten clear on your vision within Wisdom of Kings. You've been disciplined in writing and really allowing that to evolve itself, the creativity to take off. What has changed for you with your relationship with your sons, with your wife, with your family, with your coworkers?
Um, Man, I'm really more aware of my flaws for sure. I'll write something about what kind of man that I want to be or what kind of husband that I want to be. And if my wife and I get into an argument, she'll bring it up, be like, "Really? I thought you wanted to be this kind of man." And I'm like, "Oh, you really had to go. You had to go there, didn't you?" But she's right. I'm just like, yeah, you know, when I write something about being a dad, and my boys don't read my stuff because they don't really have social media. Um, but every once in a while, I'll be like, "Bro, that is so, you hypocrite. You just wrote that you want to be that kind of dad, and then you acted that way, you know." So that would probably be the main thing, is I've put myself, I've really made a, for better or worse, I've put it out there that, like, this is the kind of dude I'm gonna be, and now I got to live up to it. And even in a strange sense, even when none of my audience on Instagram is like aware of what I'm doing, in a strange sense, it's like I have an awareness that there's people watching me, and in a good way. I kind of use it as motivation to be like, man, if my Instagram audience saw me doing what I'm doing right now, they'd be disappointed, because I do have people that look up to me and that are mirroring me and modeling me, and uh, it's really, for me personally, it's really humbled me and given me a sense of just another level of accountability and responsibility that I have to live up to the idea. Because really, all of us that are talking about masculinity and fatherhood and manhood, we're talking about ideals. We're not talking about, like, none of us fully embody all these things 24/7. Man, like, I fail all the time. But I think, and that would be the main thing I would tell these guys, anybody listen, like, dude, when you see guys like me and Rios, Matt Boudreau, we'll be the first to tell you, like, man, we're writing about ideals. We don't even do this stuff all the time, not even close. But we're striving for something. We're setting a target that is difficult to achieve, and none of us are going to always hit that target ever. And I think I would use that for a lot of the guys as encouragement to say, man, don't compare yourself to me. Like, I'm writing what I want to be just as much as what you're trying to be. You know. So that would be my answer to that question, is just a whole nother layer of accountability and responsibility that I feel to live up to practice what I preach.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I think that that's what a lot of men, the reason why they, like, when they're doing self-development, when they're really putting in work, and they're hitting a wall, or they're seeing failure, they shut down because they're seeing this ideal of, hey, this is what this should be, and I'm not hitting it, and I'm failing, and let me just kind of restrict and close inward. And what I take away from all that is, just because especially with Wisdom of Kings and even the work that I do working with men as well, is like, I don't hit the mark every single time, right? Just because I'm telling you something doesn't make me the master of it. I'm still striving to
Yes.
do that every single day. And it's about the more that we build this repetition, the more that we do it, we're creating a space. We're creating this space between stimulus and reaction. And that's our freedom. That's a Viktor Frankl quote. Our freedom lies within stimulus and reaction. We get to choose how we respond. We get to choose how we show up. Doesn't mean we're always going to choose the right way. And what you just said, for men that are listening, I think it validates like, oh, let me keep pushing forward. Let me keep taking the ones, the 1% better every day. A 50% workout's better than no workout type mindset. And so diving into that whole, I want to give you the opportunity for an elevator pitch. Like, if men have resonated with your message, if men have like, I want to work with Ryan King. I know the type of man he is. How can they get in contact? How can they work with you? What do you recommend?
Just follow me on Instagram and DM me. I don't do any coaching services or like one-on-one personal work or anything like that. It's more of it's more of like a way of just serving, giving back. And so if guys are struggling with something, they can shoot me a DM. And unless it's, really time consuming, I usually just chat with guys and talk to them.
Perfect. I mean, that's it's easier than I thought it would be.
Yeah,
Ryan, I just want to say thank you again for your time. I really appreciate you speaking
absolutely.
on it. And I know there's a lot of men that are going to resonate with this and really be helped by just the message that you have.
Well, I hope so, man. I appreciate it.
All right, take care.
You too.